Welcome to the African News Review podcast, where we cut through the noise and get to the truth. I am your host, Adesoji Iginla, and each week we are here to challenge the biases, prejudices, and misinformation in the Western press about Africa. Using historical context and contemporary insights, we set the record straight and reclaim the narrative. Tune in every Sunday at 12 p.m. Eastern as we uncover the real stories and reshape the conversations about Africa. This is the African News Review podcast, reclaiming Africa's narrative, one story at a time. Yes, greetings, and welcome to another episode of African News Review. And yes, we here for another conversation around Africa's depiction in the Western media. And my name is Adesoji Iginla, joined as always is the queen of the house, Fubara Eneli Esquire. She is author of Kwanzaa a Celebration, host Rethinking Freedom, 98.5 FM, co-host Women and Resistance. The gentleman would need no introduction, but we shall accord him his dues. He is none other than Comrade Milton Allimadi. He is the host of Black Star News, WBAI 99.5 FM, author of the book Manufacturing Hate, which inspired this program. And so both of you, welcome.
Asante.
So as is usual, news from where you are at, please. We know the snow is there, but there was still news. Who wants to go first? Ladies first.
No, we'll start with brother. We've missed him.
Yes, that's true.
So I think what you've been hearing is about the weather, first of all.
Mm-hmm.
So DC is blanketed right now in snow. I went out for a little bit. My phone actually kind of froze. I was worried because I used my hotspot. So I was worried whether I would be able to even participate on today's show. So that is the domestic, right, local news. But obviously, of course, the national news is what we are seeing in with the execution, the second execution in recent weeks. This point-blank shooting of this individual who was surrounded by several ICE officers, you can see. And it's what's interesting is that these are the kind of acts of brutality that Africana people used to be subjected to, whether Black, Latino, and they would complain and nobody would take them seriously. So to show you the nature of, we have to go really beyond race, right? Because these last two victims have been Europeans and they're not being shot in under darkness of night. This is in broad daylight. Yeah. So it tells you what the system is willing to do and defend. And it takes me back to what the very wealthy individual told me, and I've spoken about this at least 5 or 6 times during our shows over the last many months now. And the more I think about it, the more I realize how correct he was. This is a billionaire who, and now I can't precisely place the timing, but it might have been as long as 15 years ago, told me that, Milton, we might see a revolution in this country. And now he's about 95 years old, so I guess he maybe was in his late 70s then, or maybe early 80s. And I said, why? He said, because you cannot sustain a society like this where you only have people like me and everybody else. He said, when I started making my money in the 1980s, there was a middle class. You could have one decent job, pay off your home, retire, and still have money. You've sent your kids to school. You've been taking vacations. Now you need 3 jobs just to exist. And the problem is we're going to have these uprisings, and the big mistake they believe is that they'll be able to use the armed forces to suppress it. But it's not going to work because it's going to be huger and huger in size and multiple locations at the same time. It may not happen in my lifetime, talk about him, but most likely in your lifetime. Every time I see these kind of instances, I reflect upon that. So the incident itself, superficially, it might be because people are angry at the way they are going after undocumented people in this country. But that is only the surface level, right? There are a lot of other grievances that are not being expressed at that particular moment, but that exists, right? And I think the combustibility is going to keep increasing. And now you cannot dismiss the words of a billionaire saying there might be a revolution in this country.
Hey, sister?
I have so many songs playing in my head right now. I'm hearing Tracy Chapman talking about a revolution. But I'm also hearing my sister singing, "We who believe in freedom cannot rest." And one of the things that I've seen from time to time on social media and even in conversation with some people is, Black folk, we're going to sit this one out. Some people who were criticizing Don Lemon and the civil rights attorney who went out to the church in Minnesota, and obviously DOJ targeted the Black people first and said, "Hey, told you all to sit this one out. This is not our fight." And to the point that Comrade Allimadi is making, this goes so much beyond just, we're trying to quote unquote get illegal immigrants out. This is not what it's about. We know statistically that the Obama administration deported more people than the Trump administration has, and we did not see this kind of terror on the streets. So this is not about getting rid of criminal immigrants. I mean, if you're going to people's jobs, if you are pausing naturalization ceremonies, if you're going and pulling people out of there when they're reporting to their immigration officer like they're supposed to do, following the legal process, and that's where you're arresting them. This is not about criminality. And then when you hear, I don't know what you call her face seems to be melting in real time. When you hear her say, if Minnesota would just turn over the voter rolls, they will leave Minnesota. You understand that white folk who are still, because I noticed that they said 48% of white people still approve of what Trump is doing in terms of ICE and quote unquote getting rid of the illegals. 48%. This poll came out after Renee the Good was murdered. And so whiteness is a hell of a drug. That's all I got to say. It's a hell of a drug. And they've killed another one of their own. And so I just want to say to all of us, there's no sitting this out, because what we're seeing now, when we ask the question, what were they doing when they came and started kidnapping people in Africa? Why didn't the other Africans fight? You're seeing some of the answers here.
Yep.
Looking out for their self-interest. If I protect myself, it won't touch me. And then by the time you realized it was coming your way, there was no one else to fight with you.
Yep.
Very good point.
What happened in Germany with neighbors turning on neighbors? What has happened in Gaza? What are we still doing? Watching? It's like Twilight Zone, board of peace. By the way, 50% or more of the countries that are supposedly on this board of peace are banned from coming to the United States of America. I don't even know what those leaders are thinking, so-called leaders are thinking. But the rest of the world has stood back to allow this 34-time felon, whom, by the way, they should all have barred from coming to their nations anyway, the same way they deny visa entry to other criminals. They could have done that. Instead, the UK were like, yeah, come sleep in Buckingham Palace. And now this guy is unilaterally choosing who he wants to sit on this so-called board of peace while they're building their condos on Gaza, going to transport these Palestinians to Somaliland. I mean, this is crazy. If someone had written this script 15 years ago, most of us would have said 10 years ago, 5 years ago, this is ridiculous. This can't happen. But we're watching it in real time. And here's what this has exposed, if nothing else for me, that the world is largely made up of a lot of cowards.
Absolutely.
And I'm really speaking to each and every one of us. Listen, I have children. I want to be around to see them grow up. I want to possibly see grandchildren. But you know what? I'm willing to speak out. And if it's my time to go, let me go. Let me go fighting and standing, because this acquiescing, Zora Neale Hurston told us, you're quiet. It will kill you and say that you liked it. It's like when women get raped. Well, she didn't cry loud enough. She must have been enjoying it.
Just taking a quick break here on the African News Review podcast, but don't go anywhere. If you're enjoying our deep dive into the real stories behind the headlines, make sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Every Sunday at 12 p.m. Eastern, we're here to debunk the myths and bring you the truth about Africa. Want to help spread the word? Share this podcast with your friends and leave us a review. It goes a long way in helping others discover the real Africa. Without further ado, let's get back to setting the record straight.
Or she must have been. Look at what she was wearing. Look at what she was wearing. That's what they're saying.
People, we have to resist in every way that you can think of. I don't care how small you think your resistance is. We have to resist in every way. Last thing, we did have a debate in Texas yesterday between James Tallarico and Representative Jasmine Crockett, and I was glad to see that they did not sling mud at each other because we don't need that. I wish we could have coordinated better and that they didn't have to run against each other, but here we are. Whatever it is, whatever letter you have behind your name, which is ridiculous because nobody was born with a D and R and I or whatever. Listen, we need one of them to represent Texas in the Senate. So go out and vote. I'm going to be voting for, you can ask me later, I'll tell you who. If you follow me, you actually already know who I'm going to be voting for in the primaries. But even if the candidate I go for in the primaries does not win, I will be going for the other one. So my vote for Senate will either be Jasmine or will be James, both J's. And we are going to try and get them into the Senate because we need them.
Yeah. Okay, so very quickly, just, a few seconds on what you said. The world is filled with cowards. Fortunately, the good thing is sometimes when a few step forward, you will see the immediate surge. I think we saw that in Gaza. When South Africa stepped forward, the world really became very vocal after that. After South Africa filed the action at the International Court of Justice, ICJ. In terms of the Board of Peace, this is Berlin Conference in real time. At least in Berlin Conference, the victims were not aware of these conversations. But in this time, the victims are watching in real time, and the rest of the world is also watching and doing essentially nothing for the victims. And then the third point, in terms of what you said about Germany. So now you see how very easy it was for Hitler to emerge, because you have the German populace who feel they've been aggrieved, they were humiliated by the Treaty of Versailles after World War I. So this individual is bringing back, it's comparable to what Trump is doing. Why?
He made Germany great again.
There you go. No, absolutely. There you go. And that's exactly what he's manifesting in this country. And so long as it doesn't impact me, it impacts all the others.
I don't care.
I can live with it.
Yeah. I mean, the news here is when Trump, speaking to Maria Bartiromo, or whatever her name is, said, we don't really care about Britain. They didn't really support us, And when they came to Afghanistan, they were just doing some patrol. So you can imagine the Rule Britannia crowd over here. They're like, what is he talking about? And so they made him understand the fact that Britain lost 457 soldiers in Afghanistan alone. And the fact, he also said something which I think he said at Davos. It was Davos, where he said, were it not for the American role, Europe will be speaking German. Yes.
He did say that.
Yeah, there's an element of truth to that, but also devoid of real context of history. I think we need to clarify that. There were two pivotal battles in World War II. Two pivotal battles. You could look them up. It's the Battle of Stalingrad and the Battle of Berlin, none of which the West partook in. It was the NKVD, the Red Army of Russia, that in pushing back at the Battle of Stalingrad, in pushing back, surrounding the German, is it the 6th Army? I think it was the 6th Army. In the 6th Army, and Stalin asked his generals went to Stalin and asked, what do we do next? He said, well, you have to follow them to Berlin, which they did. They went into Berlin, commit so much atrocities, some of which is well documented. You could read Anthony Beevor's classic, Berlin, or Stalingrad, or even World War II, which combines the two, gives you an overall view of all of the histories I'm talking about. It's not that the Allied forces didn't do their part in Germany, but most of the victories they won was outside of Germany. So that's where that element of truth needs to be told, because the vilification of Russia, which again we can go into, is why most of this history is skewed. Because if you went in as a combined force, hoping to defeat Nazism, but the moment you come out, you want to dominate the entire conversation, here is where we get the East-West conversation, which is totally unnecessary. That is a matter for another day.
I think it's necessary. It's competing ideologies. After the war, you had the U.S. capital against Soviet so-called communism. It was not really communism per se, because as Marx himself said, communism can only come after an advanced industrial society. So in fact, the best candidate would be a country like the United States, not a backward country like Russia. So Russia, whatever system they had, was opposed to the West. And I think it had some benefits, because during the bipolar era, that is also the era of African liberation. We got weapons and support from those countries that are opposed to the West, which was the Soviet Union and China, People's Republic of China. So it helped us in some ways as well, as Africans.
So that's a bit of
interesting that you mentioned Russia, though, because Putin just played another great hand.
There you go.
You got to pay $1 billion to join my board of peace. First of all, where's the money going? Listen, the complicity of the U.S. Congress is mind-boggling.
No, it is.
I mean, really? Really?
I think the big question is, can it go on for 3 more years? That is the major question. This 1 year alone.
They have torn apart their own country, because what else? Like he said, I can shoot someone in Central Park and I will go free. He is proving that. Yep, because how does a president sell resources of another country in an account bypass Congress?
Right.
In an account that only he has access to.
Right.
And the media has said nothing. It's business as usual. But let's get back to Russia.
Right. And then he sets up a Ponzi scheme. This is a Ponzi scheme, this Board of Peace thing. You invest $1 billion, you invest $3 billion, you have a membership for 3 years, Amazing.
And by the way, this Board of Peace. But then, Putin said, we'll join. Use the money that you've already seized. Mm-hmm. That's it. We can get access to it anyway. Go ahead, take that money and just put it in there. And so you've just money laundered for Russia.
There you go.
And again, the media as we would say in Nigeria, they have said, you gotta have gone and visited in Africa to know there's nothing, not a word, silence.
And you've noticed that, we'll come to one of it in one of our stories. The way they pay hard and fast rules with so-called rules of engagement. I'm talking about the United States, the EU, and all its so-called Western democracies is just indicative of madness. This guy, Aimé Césaire, in his book, Discourse Colonialism, he said a civilization that plays hard and fast rules with its principles is a dying civilization. And we can see it happening in real time. Yeah. So that said, we'll go into our first story, which comes from the Financial Times, the Money paper, and it's titled The Opposition Leader, Bobi Wine. Opposition leader Bobi Wine urges Ugandans to reject fake election results. Speaking to Financial Times from hiding, Wine said his safety is at risk after son of President Yoweri Museveni threatens to kill him. Opposition leader Bobi Wine calls on Ugandans on Tuesday to reject Yoweri Museveni's purported victory in last week's election and told the FT that a police crackdown on his supporters was on the way. So the official result gave octogenarian Museveni, who was seeking a 7th elective term in office, nearly 72% of the vote to Wine's 24% on a turnout of just over half of the electorate. The usual refrain, Wine, a former pop star whose real name is Robert Kuniani, described the results as fake and widespread balloting stuffing took place. We did our part, he said in a telephone interview. Our democracy has been abused, the election has been rigged. But there's a part here which is funny. The former head of state in Nigeria, President Goodluck Jonathan, criticized the involvement of the military in the electoral process and said the internet shutdown has created public mistrust. There were scattered protests in Kampala. This is the FT reporting, but nothing on the scale of what happened in neighboring Tanzania during the disputed polls last October, the newspaper said, when the state oversaw a brutal crackdown. Then here is one key point I want us to put a pin in. Museveni, who took power in 1986, the head of a rebel army, credited stability for his victory and said an atmosphere of maximum unity was returning to the country. He claimed the Wine's National Unity of Platform Party had planned to attack polling stations in places where they were losing and said some of its members were terrorists. What would you say to just that? To begin with, what would you say to that part? That they were terrorists and maximum stability. What is Yoweri Museveni suggesting there? That he's the arbiter of truth, the arbiter of justice, or what? Comrade.
So
we should also say a disclaimer that you're of Ugandan descent.
Oh, absolutely. I'm anti-dictators everywhere.
Okay.
I've condemned them in Cameroon, in Ivory Coast, in Tanzania. I've called for popular uprisings in all those countries. So, of course, I also endorse popular uprising in Uganda to get rid of illegitimate regimes. So you asked that part about attacking polling stations where they were losing. How would they know they're losing in those polling stations? How would they know? Think about that. So, the lies are so obvious that you just have to pay attention to what is being said to see how preposterous it is, number one. Number one, but the most essential thing is there were no elections in Uganda. There were no elections in Tanzania. You cannot have something where you turn off the lights and you call it election. It's like us having the electorate in a large room and then with the candidates are Milton and Adesoji. And I am the one who appoints the person who counts the votes. And then my people turn off the lights. And while the lights are still turned off, somebody shines a flashlight at the person who counts the votes. And it says, Milton won, Milton won. That's how preposterous it is. So even for media to take that seriously and not make that the lead in their articles. This article, by the way, is less offensive than the ones in the BBC, which said Museveni won and opposition candidate cries foul, right? So this one actually is much better. But for them to not lead off with the fact that essentially the lights were turned off, and of course, something like this would not be acceptable in Britain. Nobody would take it seriously. People would probably be behind bars by now. There would probably be a popular uprising. People would not take it seriously in the US or in Germany or in France or in Italy, these so-called quote-unquote advanced countries. So why are you accepting that elections were held in Uganda while the internet was turned off? There could only be a couple of reasons. Number one, you don't really see them as human beings. The British people would not take anything seriously in the United States if the United States, even under Trump, let's say, were to so-called hold elections while the internet was switched on. So you have different standards. There's standards for humanity, and then there's standards for, quote-unquote, the others, including Africans, right? That's the only basis or explanation that, that could make that acceptable, that you're not judging them by the same standards.
Yep.
And then here's the other interesting thing, which was also dominant in BBC articles, right? At one point, they said the internet was turned off, so it was not easy to get reliable information. But yet, they also said, Bobi Wine said the elections were rigged without providing evidence, but did not say Museveni's hand-appointed election commission provided any evidence to show that he actually won. And then one final point. The electorate, okay, so they gave Museveni 72% and Bobi Wine 24%. I think they essentially just switched the numbers because the population of Uganda, 73% is under the age of 30. There's no way in hell that they would have voted for Museveni. And they make the overwhelming majority of the population. So most likely Bobi Wine actually won by 72%, and Museveni earned 24% of the vote. And then one final correction, and this is a direct message to Comrade Bobi Wine. You are not the opposition leader. You are the winner of the election. So you have to say to media, when you speak to media, that I am the winner of the election, I'm the legitimate ruler of Uganda, and Museveni is the opposition leader. In fact, not only opposed to the electorate, but actually in opposition to the people of Uganda.
Media training.
Because words matter.
Yes.
Sister?
First and foremost, I am so grateful that I shouldn't call her Mrs. Wine because that is not their real name.
Yes.
Mrs.
Barbara goes by Barbie, right? She goes by Barbie.
Yes. That she is at a hospital.
Yes.
That although she was brutalized in other ways, it does not appear that she was sexually brutalized, because when I heard that, some of you may not know this, but basically Wine's home was under siege. He was able to escape because they really were going to kill him. That's just how these things go. But she was still at home with other people. Family members were trying to get to them to get food and resources to them, and they could not get to them because Museveni's people would not allow them access. They eventually broke in. There's evidence on the internet of how they destroyed his home and brutalized his wife, trying to get her to give up his whereabouts, which she probably had no clue where he was anyway. And as I was reading that story, my heart was absolutely in my stomach, because for far too many women, we don't just get beaten up physically.
Right.
There's a whole other level of abuse that happens that is very hard to heal from. But fortunately, she surfaced in a hospital. She has granted a number of interviews, and some world leaders have spoken up, not criticizing the election itself, but at least saying that the government should not go after Bobi Wine and his family. So I don't know if that puts a little bit of a pause, because the rhetoric coming from Museveni's son, who, by the way, is positioning himself as the next dictator after his father dies, is very concerning. And he was very, very bold in saying not only what he would do to Bobi Wine, but also to Larry Madowo, who is a journalist. And then also what they're doing to many of the quote-unquote opposition leaders, really the party that won, who are still missing. There are over 2,000 missing. They're claiming 30 dead, but the people on the ground are saying that there are really thousands that have been killed. So anyway, what we know for sure with any of these stories, the articles that are being written, is if there was an internet blackout, if you did not have journalists on the ground observing, you have no clue what the hell you're talking about. You are basically using the talking points of the regime. And we know, for all the reasons we've discussed over the past month here on this channel, that the West likes Museveni in power because it provides, quote unquote, some stability to them. And we know that other African leaders will not speak out because they don't want the scrutiny for when they act up either. So they're all largely either quiet or congratulating him, including Jonathan Goodluck, who, by the way, comes from Rivers State in Nigeria, which is where my family is from, where the governor there has been under assault since he was elected. They're now trying to impeach him because the previous governor feels like he should still be running that state. And Jonathan has not been able to wield any kind of influence or bring about any peace right there. And so for you to be talking about an election in Uganda that you were not physically on land to witness, and then this is the statement you have to make, is ridiculous. So there's a lot of complicity here. Again, for the people of Uganda, I'm seeing the pictures, the videos of mothers crying. My heart always goes at anyone who's buried a child or a brother or sister. You guys know this pain. Nobody wants to sacrifice their lives or the lives of loved ones.
Right.
But these dictators will not go out by just being, if we just appeal to their better humanity, because they have none.
Absolutely. I think if you needed people to really come out to remove colonial rule, to remove apartheid, atrocity, and there's essentially no difference because they're using the same apartheid methods, repression, brutality, killing, locking up people, exiling people, and to be addressing the regime itself, it's almost a waste of time. You have to go after the structures that support the regime.
Yeah.
So in the case of South Africa, people went after corporations that were sustaining and after the governments that were sustaining. And that is the approach that the youth in Africa have to start adopting. So for in Uganda, for example, and the same thing I said for Total can just not be allowed to be profiting from the blood of Africans, whether it's in Cameroon, whether it's in Uganda. So there has to be campaigns against Total, and there actually has been a very effective one in Uganda for that pipeline that they're trying to build from Uganda to Tanzania. So because of a lot of the mobilization, a lot of the activism, a lot of the financial backers of that pipeline disappeared, the insurance companies disappeared. So those are kind of efforts that need to be escalated. And then they will realize it's time for us to part company with this dictator of 40 plus years.
And I'm going to say this because sometimes we just feel like we're so powerless to do anything. And I understand that all of us have really busy lives. There's so much going on already. But really, it still works, even in this crazy political environment, to call your senators, your representatives, to send postcards and to verbalize or to put in writing your opposition to whatever it is that's going on. So it's a simple script like, hey, I'm asking for safety guarantees for Ugandan opposition leader, or I'm asking for the United States of America to stop supporting the regime of Museveni because they are killing people. I mean, whatever words you need to use. And if you need help, hey, you can reach out to us. We will help with that. We need to make our voices heard, because when we look back and study how we were able to overcome apartheid, there were a lot of tactics that we used.
Absolutely.
And one of them was putting pressure on the U.S. government, but also on, as you mentioned, Comrade, on these various corporations as well. So don't feel that it's a world away. I am powerless to do anything. First, getting educated, very important. Spread the word, and then use whatever power you have in whatever way that you can.
Okay, and I just want to add one other word. The fact that he so-called escaped when his home was surrounded by hundreds of soldiers, that to me is actually a good sign. I think some of the soldiers were not willing to carry out the order, which I'm sure was to eliminate him. Yeah, it could be like, he resisted arrest or what have you, or to at least capture him so that he's in captivity. I think it's much more likely that some soldiers allowed him to escape. And that is why Museveni's son, is in such a panicking mode, because he realizes that the military may not be 100% behind him. And it would not be surprising. I don't believe that every member of the armed forces would endorse a commander-in-chief who tweets that we killed 22 of them, and I hope the 23rd one is going to be Bobby Wine. Or last May, when he posted a photo of Bobby Wine's head of security, whom he had captured and shaved off his head and then tortured him, and the guy is bleeding. And he boasted that I'm torturing this guy in my basement right now. It's on Twitter. It made a front page on many national newspapers. So I believe that Muhoozi believes that the military is playing a factor in what is going on in Uganda right now.
Wow.
That might be the case, and I hope it is, because then that means there's resistance from within. There's a spiritual side of it, because there was a time in my life, actually I was a first-year law student, and the army surrounded our home in Port Harcourt to arrest my father. And they were going to charge him with treason. And if I tell you how my father escaped, today, if he tried it again, he could not get through the bars that he got through. I couldn't get through the bars he got through.
Wow.
I absolutely believe it was an act of God, but I might be wrong. And he was able to, because the house was surrounded. He got through this, a lot of African homes, you have the burglary proof on the rods to keep thieves out, but then it can also keep you in.
Right.
But he escaped through that and was able to find a cut in the fence that we kids had done to get out.
You're probably thanking
we
now.
shouldn't have.
Wow.
And he was able to slip through that to get over it. So I don't know how he got out. I'm glad he got out, because I think it's really important that he was not in that home when they
Absolutely. I agree.
Okay. Speaking of getting out, Trump is of the opinion that the UK is being critically stupid, as he puts it. For that story, we go to The Guardian. I can imagine. But hey, listen. People do talk. He said, and I quote, Trump cites UK stupidity over Chagos Islands as a reason to take over Greenland. The US president said on social media that Britain's decision to cede Ireland to Mauritius is an act of total weakness. Donald Trump has suggested Britain's decision to cede the Chagos Islands to Mauritius is amongst the reasons he wants to take over Greenland. Writing on his website, Trump said, shockingly, our brilliant NATO ally, the United Kingdom, is currently planning to give away the island of Diego Garcia, the site of a vital U.S. military base, to Mauritius, and do so for no reason whatsoever. A UK spokesman, however, said the UK would never compromise on our national security. We acted because the base on Diego Garcia was under threat from after court decisions undermined our position and would have prevented it operating as intended in future. Immediately after the comments, the shadow press secretary, and look at that name, Priti Patel, said, President Trump has said what we've said all along. Labour's 35 billion Chagos surrender is a bad deal for Britain. It's bad for our national security. We're opposed to it from day one. It's time Starmer, who is the UK Prime Minister, puts the security of our country first and scrap this rotten deal. Who wants to go first?
Well,
I think brother should go, because I've missed him the last couple of weeks.
okay. Okay. So first of all, I just wanted to note that, your father was a cat in a previous life, obviously, to be able to make that kind of escape, and blessings to him. Now, in terms of this story, first of all, Russia and China are saying thumbs up, and Ukraine is saying wow, and Taiwan is also saying wow. Because there's a quote there in this story. Where is it? Essentially, he's saying might is right. And he said he's referring to Russia and China, these are international powers who only recognize strength, which is why the United States of America, under my leadership, is now, after only 1 year, respected like never before. So he's saying this conduct is correct, which means that it is correct for Russia to pursue the same policy toward Ukraine. It is correct for China to pursue the same policy toward Taiwan. which of course leaves people like, Rubio scratching his head. That's the major point I wanted to make on this story. And then the second one is Chagos. I don't understand when they say they need it for security needs, whether it's the United States, whether it's Britain. This is the philosophy of 19th century colonialism. Before you had carrier ships. Now you have carriers that each can hold dozens of fighter jets. You have floating islands that can go to whichever location you want to conduct your imperialism. So why do you really need Chagos? What's missing in the story? There's something that I fail to comprehend. Are there minerals involved somewhere that we don't know? By having this lease, do the British have access to oil finds that they've not revealed to the people of Chagos and Mauritius? There's something that's been missing for a very long time in the story. In the era of carrier warship, you do not need a physical static island. I would take a ship that can move a floating island over Chagos anytime. So those are my two comments.
Sister?
I hope Africans across the diaspora are paying attention. Because when Mark Carney made his comments at Davos this past week, and he said plainly what many of us who've been paying attention already know about this world order that they tell us is for the peace and the well-being of everybody, and they're looking out for all of us. But really, they're different sets of rules for different people. And of course, Mia Motley has been saying that. Many other people have been arguing that. I think for those who always believe the white man's ice is colder, it took hearing a white man say, listen, and he used these exact words, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu.
Menu, correct?
In this whole article, the Africans are not at this table.
So clearly,
you are not, listen, might is right. We are going to not solve world hunger. We're not going to cure diseases, none of that. We are going to use every resource. We're going to use your blood, sweat, and tears, your taxpayer dollars, to fund more military exploits, to build Patriot missiles faster and bigger and more invisible and so on and so forth, so that we can conquer more of the world.
Yep.
And by the way, of course, his very smart man, smarter than anybody who's ever lived, said, look, we have a winter storm coming. That means there's no global warming. At the same time that it's like the Arctic is melting, the idiot cannot put two things together. So anyway, in reading this article, first and foremost, you guys, it should be really clear, you cannot believe anything that the felon-in-chief says. If he says something to this minute, it can change the very next second. And so the fact that they signed off on, first of all, Africans have no agency. We have no agency. Comrade Allimadi has already made it clear we are not sovereign. We have no independence. We're just lying to ourselves. Let's just be clear about that. Even with this whole decision, okay, so whatever pressure was put on the UK, they signed this agreement. There are people in the UK who are opposed to it. But Trump and Rubio say this is a great idea once upon a time. Now, all of a sudden, it doesn't suit their needs. We don't know all the reasons why, except that I think this man probably is incredulous himself that the world is not providing any obstacles to his grandiose ideas of ruling the world. I mean, listen, the first time he won as president, he didn't believe he was going to win. And then he won and it was like, okay, now what? And he didn't know what quite to do, which is why we didn't see as much chaos and there were still some adults in the room with that first presidency.
Yeah.
But once he was like, and then some of these puppeteers started to gather and said, we know how to get him.
Yeah.
Massage his ego, and we can get him to do anything. And we see that these people are following this golden calf. So we can make him do the things we want done to achieve our own aims, boom, they put together this Project 2025. And their goal, as they wrote in that Project 2025, was to minimally have 60% of it implemented within the first year.
Yeah.
And I have to say, they have probably exceeded that goal.
Mm-hmm.
And they have surrounded him with yes men and women. And yes, so anyway, coming back to this, Africans, we need to be very concerned because today it's the Chagos Islands, it's Greenland, and tomorrow it could be another Berlin conference. And it will be the super world powers. The other idiots on the board of peace will not be at the table.
They're going to be
because
part of
the
the menu.
price will go up to 20 billion and they won't have it to pay. But it will be Russia, possibly China, and US. And it's like, okay, which part of Africa do you want? We need to be very careful. The time to resist is right now. That's all I have to say on this one.
All right, so two quick
You
points.
want to say something, comrade?
Yeah, two quick points. You spoke about him not encountering any resistance. This time he did on Greenland. And that's why we saw some moderation in his tone toward Greenland, because the Europeans realized he's gone beyond the line. We can't just allow him to walk over us on Greenland. They gathered, they fortified their backbone a little bit so that Trump actually had to acknowledge that we had some talks with NATO. We've come to an agreement that he can't disclose the detail, but I don't think we are going to be seeing the U.S. flag soon yet over Greenland. But that to me is a lesson that when you do stand up together, you can accomplish some things. And then the second lesson here is this whole thing.
So why couldn't they stand up for the Palestinians?
And that's the problem.
Why couldn't they stand up
That's a very good question.
for the Venezuelans? And why are they not standing up against this board of peace that was signed in Switzerland?
No, but I'm
land?
agreeing with your
That's
point.
ridiculous.
I'm agreeing with your point. And the point is that in the other cases, these are not Europeans. The Palestinians are not seen as worthy of them standing up. And they never would have even said a word had South Africa not launched the first salvo with the lawsuit at the International Court of Justice. But this whole thing with the Council of Peace or whatever it is should be a lesson to the BRICS countries. The BRICS countries, this is an opportunity to expand BRICS into what the United Nations should have been, where you don't have 5 members with veto power that can unravel anything and everything that's been agreed by the General Assembly. So this is your opportunity to set up a real United Nations. Don't give it the same name, of course, because I imagine that would be copyright infringement. But come up with that organization that is actually needed today. And then that's how you make this a World Peace Council irrelevant. If you set up a true United Nations through what you have foundation already, you have BRICS. Build from there.
Okay. Sister mentioned something earlier that which Makani talked about, which is if you're not part of the planning team, then you're obviously on the menu. The Chagos Island, Diego Garcia in particular, and Greenland, they have a couple of things in common, which is why sometimes, I don't know which gentleman said it, oppression somewhere is oppression everywhere else. Injustice somewhere is injustice everywhere. I think it's Martin Luther King Jr. The reason I say that is in the 1960s and effectively 1973, April 27, 1973, the UK, by the Queen's royal consent, signed an order that the place be vacated. And they moved everybody out of the place, handed it over to the United States to create a base. Diego Garcia in particular, not the other island, just Diego Garcia, one of the islands among the Chaguan archipelago. So basically, you wiped out an entire generation, you concrete over their land, you gassed their animals. I mean, there's a documentary on YouTube. I think it's titled Chagos. It's just titled Chagos. If you look it up, You will see it. It's all documented there. So in Greenland as well, the Danes went into Greenland in the 1700s. And what did they do? A similar type colonial conquest. They use this colonial language, it is terra nullius, which is nobody's land. So basically, human beings there don't exist. The British did it as well in Australia. The Germans did it in Namibia. So you've got this recount where we say I think it's the comrade who said the Berlin Conference is effectively in full effect again. That's what the Board of Peace is. That is when you hear all of these silly pronouncements that you're being idiotic for giving back what you stole from somebody else. Why would you do that? The Danes not only did that, but also sterilized the women. They sterilized the women. They robbed them of their language, of their culture. And they have only been making small gestures of apologies and compensation of late. And we're talking about the early 2000s. So imagine you've been doing something since the 1700s, and you're only coming to terms with it in the 2020s. And the idea that this island was supposed to be returned was only because the International Court of Justice in 2019 said Britain has no right to owning somebody else's land. They tried as much as possible to push back the time to say, well, Britain claims the right, which is what that opposition shadow secretary Priti Patel was lauding up to, that we push back. Eventually, when it became too embarrassing for them, that is when they agreed that, okay, we'll speak to Mauritius and then try and bring up an idea, which is where we got the 35 billion for 99-year lease deal. And again, it goes back to understand colonial history will give us a broad idea of where all of this story sits. And that is that for the Chagos Islands.
So will the ICJ weigh in on the Virgin Islands? Will they weigh in on Puerto Rico?
Right.
How far are we going?
Yeah, if they bring what's it called? If the people on the island bring a credible case, yeah, the ice. Sometimes it's not even the power for them to push anything. Like the good comrades.
So then, why aren't we applying that same lens to Gaza?
Sister.
Why are we not applying that same lens to Gaza?
Sister,
Yes.
here's my interjection. We can spend a week on this topic, and we will never get to any other topic. But I agree with you. It's hypocritical, 100%.
Yes.
If we are to go by that yardstick, all those territories you mentioned should have self-determination. I agree with 100%.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, it's laughable, but here is that, and I want people to go away with this. Anytime they hear that phrase, terra nullius, it's a colonial term, essentially mean we have the right to this place, devoid of its people. So the Brits did it.
I think what Sister is saying is that, yes, and good for Chagos that things are turning the way it is. But she's saying that if we were to apply that same issue of justice, right, a matter of justice, there's so many other good candidates. And I agree with her totally. You know, in this case, I think there's some blessings at play. Not in Puerto Rico, not in so many other occupied places around the world. And of course, most blatantly, Gaza.
Yes. Yeah.
So I'm just hoping that to the extent that the Europeans have found a little bit of a spine to draw a line as it pertains to Greenland, that hopefully that is going to extend to Cuba, which we know Rubio would definitely like to get his fangs into.
He said by the end of the year, I think.
And yeah. So we shall see.
Well, okay. On to the next story, which comes from Radio France International. And it's that an Ivorian village is remembering its revolt. But unfortunately, there is still a sad tale to it. It's that Ivorian village remembers the revolt that killed the French colonial officer. Residents of the village of Rubino in southeastern Cote d'Ivoire continue to commemorate an uprising against a French colonial army officer killed there on the 7th of July, 1910. The village is named after Rubino, the officer targeted in the revolt by the Abe people. The uprising is remembered as an act of resistance against colonial rule, and the event is still commemorated more than a century later. In the middle of a forest near Rubino, a dismantled bridge stands as a reminder of the revolt. The Abe people removed its boat by hand to stop the train carrying the officer. But here is where it gets tricky. The revolt was not only directed at the officer himself, but at the system he represented. The Abe people rebelled against forced labor imposed during colonial period. Rubino worked for the French Company of West Africa, CFAO, a training business active in colonial West Africa in the late 19th and early 20th century. That company still exists, by the way, and is still operating within Africa. So, sister, your thoughts?
No, actually, before she says something.
First and foremost,
Sister, before you say anything,
yes, please.
I have a question for both of you. What is missing in this article?
Okay. It's when I read it, what jumps out at me was the fact that the people were not on. Yes, they were celebrating the fact that they revolted, but the end of it is not talking about what their agency truly is. That was it for me.
Sister, what was glaringly missing in this
Again,
article?
for me, what is always missing is our story. What led to the revolt? What was going on that caused the people to revolt? And then, of course, in what ways was that revolt completely squashed? And then, because so many times these stories are not told, how common these revolts actually were, even though we're not taught about them. So even when I speak with my friends who are African American here who are like, why didn't the Africans come to save us or fight? I'm like, they were fighting for survival as well. But what do you see as missing?
Okay, so you said it, but I want you to elaborate on that. You said the word squash.
Yes.
When you squash something, what happened?
Massacred.
No, you hit it right on the... Okay, so do we see any numbers? Do we see any numbers?
No, because there are no humans involved.
Boom, but you hit it right on the point. You said, how was it squashed? How was it squashed? In translation is how many people were killed. The article does not name, not even a single casualty in a rebellion where nobody died.
Except the colonial officer.
Except the colonial officer. This one guy, and they're showing his grave, and the leader or the chief is by his grave. I mean, I've never seen such propaganda ever before. Blatant. What publication is this again? What publication is this?
Radio France International.
This is
Radio France
outrageous.
International.
Outrageous. So I wanted to interject that in the very beginning.
Okay. Sister, continue.
Again, we see the role of these international or multinational corporations. They're always the ones that they come in first. We're just trading partners.
Yeah.
Then the spiritual part of the that's the next wave that comes in to kind of get people not paying attention to what they should be doing spiritually. And then the gunboat diplomacy. And they're all working together, which is, you also see this with the United States of America, even with this quote unquote strong army. It's to allow American corporations that are these oligarchs that are paying into Trump's treasury or whatever to go into these countries and have unfettered access to, withdraw resources and colonize us essentially. And so the tactics remain the same. These traders, we're talking, we're just making money. It's not a big deal. It is a big deal. They are usually the first to show up, and they are never there to really build true partnerships. They are there to exploit. Right. And like you said, they are still in existence. So that was one thing. For me, it again just really hurt my heart that this place is now called Rubino. Like we did not exist before this. I never want to strip anybody of their humanity, but this piece of shit of a human being who came there as the face of, and usually, let me just be very clear, having lived on the continent of Africa, most of the white people who come to Africa to make their wealth
were the dregs
are
of society.
actually the ones who cannot survive on their own land.
They were the dregs of society.
Yes. Even the ones who came and started the United States of America. A lot of times it's like, I can't make it over here. I'm going to come over here. And then somehow we give them this elevated status. I see it in my Black community here in Texas where I am. White people who are completely without any true talent within their own communities, all of a sudden show up within the Black community and we elevate them. We're just so happy that a white person showed up.
Let me interject.
And then they become... Okay,
let me interject here. You remember when Trump, what's the Trump popular refrain? They're sending their rapists, their crazies, their projection.
Projection.
Port Harcourt is named after what?
A pedophile.
Mm-mm.
Most of the rivers.
Adjudicated pedophile.
Most of the rivers in the Great Lake region is named after Europeans.
So let me very quickly on Rubino so that Comrade can get into this. The key factors that led to that revolt, first of all, were forced labor. We should understand that. So while Africans may say we didn't have slavery in Africa, that's only because we do not have memory of what really happened. We may not have called it slavery, but it was slavery. So there was forced labor. The Abe people were compelled to work on colonial structures, projects, particularly railways. Yep. Go and read Malidoma Some's book. There's so many other books too that talk about the number of lives that were lost building these structures for Europeans to be able to extract wealth from Africa, right? The abuse of authority. So they could harass villagers, that's their term for us, tax us, rape us, have babies, abandon babies in my own family. I have a cousin who was sired by someone else who was actually a Frenchman who was there doing some work, whatever. And yeah, that's it. He's gone and she stayed behind. Yeah. Theft, of course, of our resources. And so we were fighting back. We've always tried to fight back. And so one of the things that our people did is they disabled the railway lines. And that is how that train could not go through. And they were able to then abduct Rubino and kill him. And then, of course, the whole focus, as Comrade said, is on this one person, as opposed to possibly hundreds, thousands of people who had lost their lives prior to this revolt, and then in the ways that they were, quote unquote, squashed. And there were similar revolts in so many other places. You can look at the Volta Bani War, 1915 to 1917. Yeah. This was a large-scale anti-colonial uprising in Burkina Faso and in Mali area, and included tens of thousands of fighters. You can look at the Baoli and Agni resistance that was also in Côte d'Ivoire. Yeah. So you can look at from the east to almost the early minutes, the Samori Taore. Mm-hmm. So all across Senegal, Guinea, Dahomey, we had this revolt. So just for those who are thinking we didn't fight back, we did. And the brutality in which Comrade will probably go into it, they were squashed. Yeah. We still have not completely studied, and we're still not even talking about.
There's before the comrade goes, there is a book that will give you an entry point into the domination and resistance. It's part of the General History of Africa series written by Aduboahem. It's Africa under colonial domination. And in there, all the documented resistance is in there. There's multiple pages of some of the most atrocious things that were done to people. and how they push back against it. So the book is General History of Africa. It's volume 7, and it's Africa under colonial domination in 80 to 1935. Yeah, go on, comrade.
All right. So this, as I said, is one of the worst propaganda stories that we've discussed recently. So this Rubino, in fact, comes out almost as a saint if you read this article. And that photo, the chief visiting his grave.
Yeah.
574 of the Abe people were killed. So why was the article not about them and showing their grave? In fact, one of the questions the sisters raised was what I was asking myself too. Why is there time? It's much more likely, and this is not told, that it was the French who decided to name that plate Rubino. I can't imagine Africans, no matter how docile they are, would resist, would take out one of them, and then would change the name of their location to the person they just killed in resistance. Think about that. So we're not even told who named that Rubino, and then we are told that he's buried in a spiritual ancestral location, almost leaving the impression that the Africans said, oh no, we killed him in resistance, but let's bury him in our ancestral spiritual land. In fact, it's much likely.
Master.
Absolutely, it's much more likely. More likely, the French said, you know what? Not only are you going to rename your town after the person you just killed, you're going to bury him in your revered ancestral land. Bury him while I'm watching, right? And then, in order to do the fighting for them, of course, they bring Africans that they are dominating. So it was Senegalese Africans that fought against the people. The article was so outrageous that I said, you know what, let me take a few minutes to look up more information. Senegalese, 1,400 Senegalese were brought to suppress the people of Abe. And the Senegalese, fighting for the French, lost 21 people. Where is their grave? They're not even mentioned in this article. This article is so outrageous to believe. And then finally, in terms of the cost of building the railways that the sister mentioned, the people that died, 14,000 Africans died building the French railway from the coast to Brazzaville in French Congo. People sometimes confuse. There was French Congo and there was Belgian Congo, which is the one that was Kinshasa. Right. And then there was French Congo, which is the one with the capital, Brazzaville. And that's where they killed 14,000 Africans died just building that one rail. And the Africans were not allowed to use the train, whose rail line that they built. Yeah. So I just wanted to point out there were so many missing things in this article. I said, you know what? Let me take a look. Who killed somebody in resistance and then names their own city after that person? No. It was just too much for me.
And then buries them in a sacred place and then honors them. But again, I don't know what has been passed down generationally, because really they need to dig up those bones, desecrate them.
Wait. No. Actually, I wrote that in my note. I said it should be relocated away from the ancestral,
Yes, cast them out. Take that poison away from your community. But let me say this, because we should always learn from history. When you talked about the Senegalese who came to fight against their own brothers and sisters, thinking they're going to gain whatever, people of Opobo, which is my ancestral homeland, went and fought on behalf of the British against the Ashanti, defeated the Ashanti. And then when the British were done with King Jaja of Opobo, guess where he was tried?
Ashanti
he was
land.
tried in Ghana, not too far from the place where he helped to defeat the Ashantis. And there was no one there to fight for him, and he got deported. So, Black Republicans who think you are fighting for your master and they are going to take care of you, let me tell you, history has shown us time and time again, they will use you, yes, to destroy some who look like you.
Right.
And when they are done with you, they will destroy
be discarded.
You too. Yeah. So learn, and do not be used.
I'm probably saying you liked it as well.
what's his name? King Jaja got a sword and a red coat.
Wow.
And a letter from the Queen of England.
Yeah.
Well that decorated. He wore with a lot of pride until they were done with him.
Then that letter couldn't help him. And the coat couldn't help him either.
No.
Speaking of burying of this people in ancestral land, guess who else is buried on spiritual land in Africa? You can't make it up. Cecil Rhodes.
I knew you were gonna call that name. I knew you were gonna call that name.
He's buried in Matomba Park in Zimbabwe.
Yep.
It is the ancestral land to
because they're representatives of white Jesus, and we cannot desecrate white Jesus.
Well, I mean, it's sometimes you've got Mosi in Tunya, the so-called Lake Victoria Falls. Just dig up the bones and just toss it into the river, and it will stop whatever it needs to. That kind of thing. But I guess my people
need African spiritualists to get to work. That's what I have to say.
Just go dig them up, man. Shovels. Final take for everyone here. If this is your first time, do like, share, subscribe, and do all the good stuff. The audio version of this will be available on all major audio podcast platforms tomorrow. And yes, bring one, bring all. And for our final story is a bit, this strikes at the heart of Africa. And it's going to be a quick one. It's titled from The Guardian. It's African football chiefs accused of not consulting fully on controversial AFCON change. And for those who are not aware of what AFCON is the African Football Confederation competition. So the tournament at the moment is played twice. It's played every 2 years. It's now supposed to be played every 4 years from 2028. Federation denies statutes is breached in making decision. And so the lead reads, the Confederation of African Football, CAF, has been accused of pushing through its controversial decision to stage the African Cup of Nations, AFCON, every 4 years without properly consulting member federation. Here is the key part I would like people to concentrate on. Tanto Mari, a former CAF vice president, believed the consequences for African football will be severe. First of all, AFCON is the biggest source of income for CAF, he said. Secondly, having AFCON every 2 years allowed host countries to build real infrastructures that has helped the development of football. For our reality, AFCON every 2 years helped local players stay competitive. Omari said the plan to make AFCON every 4 years was first raised openly by Infantino. And people will remember Infantino is the guy who gave Trump his Medal of Peace. At a CAF seminar in Morocco in 2020, Gianni gave the speech in front of all African FA presidents. He said officially that AFCON should move every 4 years in the future, and the process must be started before that. We are fighting against it. And so, knowing that an European has come in now to tell you how to run your house, even though CAF was formed in 1950, AFCON started in 1957. How does that make you all feel? Who wants to go first? Comrade?
Sure. I mean,
you're a football fan?
To be honest, I actually endorse the move. I think, yes, okay. And I'll tell you why. Not because this European suggested it, but without him, I had already been thinking, even before this story, a couple of weeks ago, when the African Cup of Nations, the one that just ended, AFCON, came up. Mm-hmm. And I said, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Wasn't there something just a few months ago in South Africa? And then I realized that one was the African Nation League Championship, which is for national teams in African countries, but with players who do not play in foreign leagues, don't play in the European League, for example, or any other international league, but they play for the national team. And then the one that just ended in Morocco, is for any good player for an African nation, whether they play domestically in Africa or whether they play in international league. So that's a second tournament. And then I think there's a third one for African clubs.
Champions League.
Exactly. Domestic football clubs, like we have all over African countries.
Yeah.
So those are three. And then in addition to that, we have the World Cup every 4 years.
Okay.
So I had been thinking, even before this article, many weeks ago, that we have too many competition. And rather than improving the quality of play, it may be too much on the bodies of these athletes. So, for example, that's why, in this country, they have professional league. They take long periods off season where the body is healing, and then they resume training, and then the league begins again. Like basketball, same thing. Baseball, the same thing. Football, the same thing. It takes its toll on these professional athletes because they play at a very high level of competition. So I don't see anything wrong with having this tournament every 4 years instead of every 2 years, because, in other words, it would still translate to 2 years anyway. They're training in 2 years to play for AFCON. They're training for another 2 years to play for the World Cup. So if it's in between years, not in the same year. So, for example, this year, you have AFCON just ended in Morocco. In a few months' time, we're going to have the World Cup in the United States. So they should be staggered. If you're having, for example, this is 2026, you have the World Cup.
Okay.
Let the next AFCON be 2028. And it means the next World Cup is going to be 40. The next AFCON is going to be 2042. So stagger it that way so that the athletes are resting their bodies. That was my main thought. And then the criticism is that this is a main revenue source for African countries and all that. Well, apparently the money is not going to the teams. I'm always hearing stories about African players for their national team going on strike because they're not being paid. Isn't that true? Even the Morocco team, I think there was an issue with Morocco. There's an issue with the Cameroon team the other day, Ivory Coast. So the argument that, this is going to diminish the revenue, I don't buy it, because apparently the revenue is not going to the right place anyway.
Okay, sister?
Full transparency. When I first saw this article, I'm like, what the hell am I talking about soccer about?
It's football.
Listen,
it's not soccer. It's not soccer.
No.
It's football.
Haven't said that. I grew up playing soccer.
It's football.
I played soccer. I've even coached soccer.
I even coached soccer too.
Yes,
Hello, people. It's football. It's not soccer.
Okay.
Thank you.
Let me rephrase. I played football.
Sister, sorry. Let me rob your time a little bit. I coach both boys and I coach women's soccer. And I coach women's team for 3 years. We had identical record every year. 8 wins, no loss, 2 ties. The boys' team was a bit mixed. Maybe like 8 wins, 3 losses. But I'll tell you this. The women actually, and I don't know whether it's a gender thing or what have you, but I'm speaking from experience. They respond to coaching. The guys are like, they respond maybe 75 to 80%. Because what can you know that I don't know, right? But the women, if you draw up a plan, they execute it as discussed. And I would like to say that perhaps that's contributed to their good record as well. But go ahead.
So I did not coach at that level. I coached my children's soccer teams. So I called it soccer because we were in the US at the time. But yes, when I played in Nigeria, and we played when, based on resources, it was shirts and shirtless. That's how you distinguish the teams. So I was young enough that I could play shirtless as well. But, great, because you could just go out and have fun, just a ball. And and your parents are not worrying about where you are and what you're doing. So I say all of that to say, yes, I understand the importance of the sport. However, just in the large scheme of everything that Africa is faced with at this time, it was also just like, really, is this what I want to discuss? So let me put that aside. Having said that, though, some of the issues that keep coming up is, yes, I agree with you, comrade, in terms of let's look at these things for ourselves and say what makes sense. But it's where we are not making these decisions for ourselves,
Right.
and where we are waiting for other people to tell us what we should do based on what works for them. That's my concern. We also know that we have a lot of talent in Africa. And because we have not properly figured out how to harness that talent, these young people end up a different form of slavery,
Yep.
working in Europe and in Asia and in these Arab countries under conditions where, yes, they may be making really good money, but they are also just having their self-esteem battered, their humanity questioned on a daily basis. And why? Because our continent will not take care of us and provide those opportunities for us. Can you imagine if we got all of these brothers playing for all of these other clubs and we were able to provide that infrastructure? So I would like to see where we are actually talking about believing in ourselves and having a game plan for not just being a farm where other people come and pick us off, use us where they want us, and then discard us. And we are making money for them. We are generating funds for them. And those resources never come back to help our young people, to create the schools and the academies where they are growing their minds, as well as having facilities where they can train their bodies, where we can afford to pay physical therapists, and we have good health infrastructure, and so on and so forth. So those are the things that concerned me as I read through this. And then just the fact that I don't know who got paid what. But to the extent that you have an organization, you have an entity, and some people can make the decision and everybody is kept out. But then those people who are kept out seemingly don't have a voice, have not figured out how they can. You are in the majority and your players. If this is something that you don't agree with, you're going to just roll over and play dead. We have to learn how to stand up for what we want. So those are just some of my initial, when I went through this, just the initial take. But, Africa, we have a lot more issues at stake here. Although even this issue with soccer it's a symptom of some of the other issues that we're dealing with. But we need to come back to our resources, our talent. How do we harness it for our own good? And not just always to be for the entertainment and the use for other people, because as they have shown us, might is right, and they have no qualms about taking everything that they can, because they do not see us as human in the first place.
All right. So based on what you said, let me just add one other thing. She said something very important, and how to empower our own leagues, domestic leagues in our countries. Here in the United States, and I don't remember the history too well, but very vaguely, and I think it was actually a black player. I think his last name was Flood, a baseball player. He was important in the founding of free agency, because he said, why are all these clubs making all the big money? And we are the athletes sacrificing our body all these years. So he would refuse to play. If the salary was just being discussed among the owners of the teams, he said, I want to negotiate directly with each team. So I'm not locked up to one team. I can go and negotiate with any team. And that's how free agency, I believe, began. And the salaries just astronomically escalated. And if they're willing to pay you astronomical relative to what you're making, it means they were making astronomical amount relative to what you were making for many years. So, sister, you said they may be paid well, but the teams also make a lot more money. I think we should have our version of, as I said, his last name was Flood. Say, I'm not going to play for you unless you give this amount to my home football confederation as a bonus. The bonus, I want my own bonus, right? But I want a bonus for my home football confederation as well. And that's how they will really make impact domestically within their own countries. So I think I thought of that as I was listening to what you were saying.
Okay. Yeah, with regards to the agency part of it, there was a case in the late 80s, early 90s. It's called the Bosman Rule, where a Belgian player took the overall football club's UEFA to court of arbitration, that a player in the last year of his contract can be allowed to speak to any player, any club, and take 100% of the money. So that became a rule. Now back to the African Cup of Nations. The African Cup of Nations is not a competition. People just see the football and think about just the football. It's actually a festival of culture itself, because it brings all this continent, it brings the entire people of the continent together and showcase what makes each of this body of people different. And you could see that on play every time you watch, every time you watch the African Cup of Nations, you saw key events about certain group of people. The last one was the showcasing of a gentleman who stood for 90 minutes, holding the position of Patrice Lumumba. And he went viral with that. And that became the face of that competition. I'm not saying, obviously, we can't look at the impact of too much football matches on the players. The problem is Europe has been trying for the past 4 decades to get to get CAF to go to the 4-year format. Now that they've gotten somebody who is leading the Confederation of African Football, a very compliant person, to agree, they've effectively just cornered the others and told them, this is what you're doing, and there is no other matter to it. One final thought on the entire thing. They not only do that, but prior to them doing that, they've already they've agreed that every football competition or match sanctioned by FIFA, you are allowed to release the players 14 days. That's 2 weeks before the match. They've cut that down to 7 days, going against even FIFA's rule. So you begin to see that this is not just about the players. This is about them controlling the narrative. And so I would want...
But I'm still not hearing any argument refuting my position in terms of the impact on the athletes. I mean, I never played professional, but I played some, they call what, semi-college or something. And it does take impact. And this is not even professional. Because, they train in the gym. They do road work. They run, It is really, it takes, in the long run, it shortens the professional lifespan, That's why we have very few players like Roger Milla, who played till he was almost 40.
So the pushback would be this. In Europe, they've got the European Cup, which they play every 4 years. In between that, they've got the Nations League. They play it every 2 years. They play Champions League every year. They've got club conferences. I mean, not the same clubs playing them, obviously. But they've also got their local leagues. So you're reducing the football played in Africa, but yet they're still showing up for the same, even if not more amount of football in Europe.
And they're being paid in Europe.
Sense. Yes.
And we are not being paid in Africa.
Okay, Brother Milton.
No, really, listen, I think it is a bit too much. You have every 2 years AFCON, and then you're supposed to prepare for the World Cup. In fact, one could argue that that's maybe one of the reasons we've never won the World Cup, because our players are never rested enough to play at that top level. By the time the World Cup comes, they've been playing in all these other leagues.
So we can make the same excuse. I mean, I don't want to make comparisons.
I can anticipate your excuse. You say Europeans play too much, and yet they win the World Cup. They win the World Cup because they field many more teams than we do.
No, I'm saying we can make the same excuse for England. England plays...
No, but I just answered that question. I said Europeans. How many European teams are in the World Cup out of the total?
They're now 48. It's a 48 team format. So they've got about, I think, 24.
Okay, so if Africans have 24, they can play every day. One of them would win.
They're never going to get 24 teams.
They have the system rigged against us. And I think our best bet is to improve the quality of our players, but don't overplay them. Once we have as many teams as they feel, play them every day if you want.
Okay.
We can debate.
Listen, I know where
I know many Africans don't like the fact that the president of FIFA is this European guy who made this suggestion. But I wish it had been made by an African, actually. So I can understand that part. Because we saw his conduct in the AFCON. He was pro-Morocco. He was against, and you're the president of FIFA. You're supposed to appear to be neutral and impartial. And you're celebrating for one of the teams, Morocco, against Senegal. And then now you're banning Senegal because the coach had them walk out for a little bit. They came back and they played. And Morocco, had they scored the penalty, they would have won. They missed the penalty. Senegal did not miss the penalty for them, So I understand that part. I don't like him either. I don't like him. Infante, I detest him. He showed his racism and his bias.
Thank you. And with that, we've come to the end of another African News Review. Hopefully you all found value in our discussion, and I can only tell.
Karen says, help, Sports Talk has taken over. Yes, we're going to have an African News Review in person, and each of us will have a soccer team, and we're going to play best of 3 and see whose team comes out on top. No, just penalty kicks.
No, I insist on 2 years. That said, we've come to you're a bit out of our line. We've come to the end of African News Review. Sister?
Always a pleasure to be in conversation with you two brilliant gentlemen and with our whole community. And I just want to encourage all of us. We've been through worse and we're still here. And so we will survive this and we will thrive as well. We just need to keep fighting.
Well, speaking of survive through this, next week, Saturday, we're going to start the first of our series of book talk, Pre-Colonial Black Africa. Join us. That will be at, that will be at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Saturday, the 30th. So do join us. We're going to be discussing how it all began, how we were before then. That's 1. And then 2 would be, in the course of the week, we're going to be looking at Anna Julia Cooper as part of our continued series of Women and Resistance. The good sister and I will be doing that. So, join us for Women and Resistance, Wednesday, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Anna Julia Cooper. And on Saturday, the first of our series of book talk, it's going to be Pre-Colonial Black Africa, Cheke Ata Diop. Yes. Until then, thank you and God bless. Sister, final thoughts? Okay, yes. And good night and God bless.
That's a wrap for this week on the African News Review podcast. We hope you are leaving with a clearer, more truthful picture of Africa. Remember, every story has another side, and we're here to uncover it. Don't forget to join us next Sunday at 12 p.m. Eastern as we continue to challenge the narratives and reclaim Africa's voice. If you've enjoyed the show, be sure to subscribe, share, and leave us a review. Until next time, keep questioning, keep learning, and keep seeing Africa for what it truly is.